Hi everyone, it's another journey, and today's journey is the creator of There Apy, a groundbreaking science-based alternative to traditional clinical therapy, and the founder of Taylormade Leadership, one of Canada's leading organizations in behavioral performance. With 35 years dedicated to the study of human behavior, our guest has spent over 2 decades speaking, training, and coaching leaders on peak behavioral performance and the powerful connection between neuroscience and enhanced human potential. I say no more. It's his journey. Andy, I welcome you to the journey.
Great to be here, David. And I'm always fascinated how people get to to the place that they are. We'll talk about my journey, but what led you to get into putting together this great podcast? What
Pod,
led you to that?
the reason behind it, I was part of a community radio station because there is, as you know, on the radio, there's types of FM radio, which is the main frequency. There's digital, which is the new norm, as they call it now.
Yeah.
There's AM, which is fast dying, and AM, medium wave and long wave. And in England, I was part of a community radio station, which at the time was just internet based.
Right.
I was
And
part of that.
so in
I was
putting
part,
together
I was part of that for 10 years.
in putting together this podcast, what was the impetus for it? What was your thought? What's your hope of what this does and becomes?
So going into the journey itself, and I've said this in the previous podcast when I had someone ask me, I wanted to make a difference. COVID was high. It was on the peak of going to where we was already in lockdown in most places. And
Yeah.
even me, when I was living in Ohio at the time, we was on the cusp of actually lockdown, and it was only essential workers going in. And I was classed as essential worker because I was a custodian in a hospital. And I wanted to do something in my spare time because I was doing night shifts, the first shift. So it's always the graveyard shift, as I call it. And I wanted to do something in the daytime to make someone's life better. And I wanted to explore people's journeys. Now, the early part for it was just the impetus of just interviewing people I knew in my contacts with because I am, finding people on IMDb. It's just curious people that I've always been interested in contacting and saying, what about, talking to me? And that's all it was. It was just talking. And then over time, people with businesses in Australia and then America, more so America, they started coming on and talking about their businesses. They started talking about what inspired their life, their business, their aspirations. I wanted to go into that. And I wanted to give people the opportunity to come on and share their story because you go on mainstream radio in Europe or mainstream radio in America, you're censored by regulations by the FDA, whatever it's called in
Right.
America, and Ofcom in England. I wanted people to come on, not to be censored. I wanted them to come on and be themselves.
Your story is so amazing because, and I know that your podcast is focused on, opening the door for the next person who's listening to be able to take their ideas and, live an amazing life and do something with it. And
Mm.
it's so interesting because everything that's on this show, right? Your studio, your background, the podcast, all the work that goes into it, sending it out to all these people, it all started with a thought,
Yes.
right? David had a thought that he might want to do a podcast about this type of approach.
Hmm.
And here we sit today. I'm in Canada, you're in the US, you
Mm.
came from the UK. And we're here, sharing ideas and concepts and, most importantly, helping other people to believe in themselves more, right? I
Yeah.
think at the end of the day, it's what it's all about.
Yes. And you touch upon that in such a way. I've covered subjects that I know have been painful. And I'm not intentionally going in there, and I always do say I know a bit about psychology, but I'm not going in there for psychological ed to make them upset and open up wounds.
Yeah,
I want to go in there to feel like I'm going in there and making that difference to help them on their journey. So yes, they may have scars. You may see the emotion, you may hear the emotion, but it's allowing them to be themselves to actually say, I've done this, I can talk about it, I can move on.
yeah,
Or in the
yeah.
case of some people, this is my first time. I may be nervous, but I can do it again and again and again and again and again. And they out.
It really is amazing when you take a thought, you invest emotion into it, you create a plan, you start to take action, you develop perseverance, you
Mm,
fail, you get back up, and that's what's created everything in our species
yeah.
since the
And
beginning of time. I mean,
and it
every bit of it. So,
and it's true. I have failed at doing this because first thing I did, I used an iPad. There is other tablets out there, so I can't advertise the fact of iPad, but I used an iPad. I didn't have a microphone. I didn't have a proper camera. I didn't have a ring light. I didn't have a green screen. That was okay. That was for
yeah,
what I could afford at the time. Even if I was working,
yeah,
that's all I could afford. And then over time, I said, okay, I'll get an Apple Mac computer, which had a built-in, you know, hard drive, which had more storage. So
yeah,
I started doing it on Zoom, which was the purpose anyway. I still did it on Zoom, but I thought invest in getting a monthly thing for Zoom to make me do longer interviews. Because I
hmm,
felt like when I had the free plan, I'm not saying it intentionally, and like I said, this is not paid promotion, so that, I must add that.
right,
But I could do more than I did for half an hour. I didn't have a watermark. The only watermark you see on the podcast, if you watch it, is actually just the logo. But that's the
right,
logo I created. And then I recorded and I did videos because I felt more, when I did the videos on the iPad, yes, it was good. And I could upload via computer if I saved to the actual, internal drive that they give you on Zoom. And then that's okay. But then I started investing more and I started building a catalog and I started having a catalog of interviews.
right,
Now, I left where I was living in Ohio to where I am now. So those first however many videos they got lost. But luckily I got the audio. So the audio is still on YouTube. It's not the video as I wanted,
right,
but I still got the audio. And then where I live now, bit by bit, I had a laptop. That was okay. The computer I'm using now started working again because they updated the computer to make it work. I think it was personally the fact that it didn't like the system at the beginning, so it was like on the constant loop. And then I got things like I'm using now. A light behind me, and I've got a green screen behind me. Got a mic. I had a microphone, but not this sort of microphone where it's adjustable, so I could talk like this.
right. Yeah.
So
Amazing.
that's my journey. That's what made me as me. And it makes me feel more connected with
Well, and
people like you.
I mean, your story and your example and all the guests that you have on gives, that person listening the license to believe in themselves, to think that
Yeah.
I could take, and if you look at anything in the history of mankind, a, a chair, a wheel, a vehicle, a spoon, there was a time it didn't exist and someone had a thought and that created it. So, this incredible process continues on. People, get so enamored by, massive success in the world, and people that create that, Bill Gates and Elon Musk and, all these people in the world, but they started with nothing,
Yeah.
and um, it's, it's something that I hope that every person that's watching this knows that the man that started this journey for me, age 16, when I left high school because I had to eat. I was walking out the door and he stopped me and he said, "I want you to know something, Randy." And I said, "What's that, sir?" He said, "I want you to know that where you are now has nothing to do with where you can go." And that, that started this journey. I grew up as a kid in poverty and parent alcoholism and violence, and ended up homeless and alone at age 14.
Mm.
So, that's where things start. And, really that day, Mr. Gretzinger, what he was saying was, "Listen, kid, I'm sorry for yesterday. I can't change that, but you can change tomorrow." And just that thought process started me, to wonder, what if he's right? What if I'm not stuck? What if I don't have to stay here? And so that led to, initially jobs in manual labor that eventually I got better jobs and I got into sales, and then I owned a couple of small companies. And age 28 on a dare, I took a chance to do something I'd wanted to do since I was a little kid and called a local radio station and got hired at $4.25 an hour part-time, working weekends and overnights. And the Coles Notes version is always easy to tell. Over 20 years, I made it to the number one radio station in Canada, to CFRB 1010 in Toronto, and then left to spend a year at Global Television, hosting my own show, and then 23 years ago to starting the organization Taylormadeleadership, in helping people to believe in themselves. Right, I'd studied behavioral performance for 35 years, and um, so this was a skill that I had that I used to work to help, predominantly people in organizations and corporations to improve their behavior, to go from where they were to where they wanted to be. And so that's what I, did for many years. Still do it. And then about a year or so ago, in working with individuals, executive clients and individuals, started to notice that more and more they were talking about personal problems that they were having, and these weren't problems that, like everyone watching right now, these aren't the things that we talk about, whether it's lack of confidence or low self-esteem or anxiety or stress or fear. Those are typically the things that we hide back behind the mask.
Yeah. And that mask is a very common thing when you do wear that
Yeah.
mask.
And they're just trying to get through life. And but there's all these barriers and limitations that are created from that. So I started working with these people, and started finding out more and more, that they had tried to get help before and they went to therapy before. And in looking at and talking about the approach of therapy, and I started doing a lot of research in therapy, and the clients were supporting this. So just a quick 2 minutes on how the brain works. So when we take in information into the files of the subconscious mind, they're stored in files, right? So I use this file folder. It's a great metaphor analogy for how the brain works. So you have a file, David, that says, "Here's how you connect your microphone to your computer." You have a file that says, "Here's how I make coffee. Here's how I drive my car. Here's how I," do all those things. So for knowledge and skill and training, it's important. And interesting to know that every thought we have and every action we take, we instantly go inside the files of the subconscious mind, open the files of past experience, and say, what do we know about this? And so if I picked up this water, I'm not aware that I'm doing it, but every one of us, every time we do something or think something, we open a file. So I open the file that says, how do I hold a glass? How do I pick it up? And the file says, put four fingers on one side, thumb on the other side. Be careful because it's heavy. Hold it at the bottom, balance it, tip it slowly, right? So all of that information is in a file. And for knowledge and training, it's tremendous. But if the file contains past negative experiences and traumas and failures and struggles, then when we have a relative thought, we open that file up and the file says, no, this causes anxiety. No, you can't do this. You can't accomplish that. You failed at this before. And so the more and more that we put information into those negative files, the larger the file becomes and the more dominant it becomes. And then it starts to trigger us.
Mm.
So you don't have to have the car accident again to feel the anxiety of what happened that day. You can see a blue van, right? Which was kind of similar to the van that hit you 15 years ago, right? And you see that blue van and it triggers those emotions. And it when it triggers the emotions, it's not only triggering the memory of the experience, it triggers the recreation of the chemical compounds or neuropeptides created by that emotion. So
Mm.
that's why you have those feelings again, and you won't even be aware of it. You'll feel, all of these feelings of anxiety, and your heart races, and you can't wait to get out of the room, and your hands are shaking, and the rest of it. So the body is recreating that chemical stamp of what happened from that event. So, in working with these people, what I was finding is that they would go to a therapist, and the therapist would say, okay, David, let's talk about that bad thing that happened in your past again. And I
Mm.
would come back the next week and we would talk about it again. And then we would talk about ways of coping with that thing that happened a year ago or 20 years ago again. But when you think about this and you say, okay, so we're developing a coping mechanism to deal with something that's not here. It's in the past. It's a memory. It's a ghost. And so every time these clients were going to the therapist is putting more and more and more paper in the file. And the file is getting bigger and bigger and bigger.
Yeah.
And they can't get over it. So all of this study and all the knowledge that I have in this said, no, that doesn't work. That's not going to help. Right? So the only answer, you can't think away this file. You have to create a new one.
Yeah.
Uh, and so that is my approach. It's through a process called inverse subconscious programming, where you program the subconscious mind to believe the opposite, right, of what the problem was. I'm terrified of flying, says the client. And I, I cry. I have to take pills. I drink before I get on a flight because my hands are shaking and I'm crying. I'm so scared because I'm going to die on the plane. You ask the person, what's the safest form of travel in the world? It's flying, right? So have you convinced yourself of a lie? Absolutely, right? So the process then says the plane is going to crash. It's going to be turbulence. We're going to die in a fireball on the ground. And the new file starts to input information that says it is by far, you're actually 600 times more likely to die in your car on the way to the airport than the plane. It is the safest form of travel in the world. I absolutely love it. It is the most exhilarating experience of my life, getting in this apartment building and leaving the earth. Really nice people bring me food and drink while I'm sitting, relaxing, and reading a book on the way to the destination, where 3 hours from now, my feet will be in the sand. I love to fly. And over time, right, through a repetitive, structured process, through reading and also the intake of recordings customized to the individual, it creates new files. And then when the person sees a plane, they open the file and the file says, "Oh, I love to fly. I can't wait to go on vacation again." And I mean, that's a major part of it. There's other elements that go along with it, but um, the results for people have been extraordinary.
Yeah, and
Just
it is a good feeling because, it's like if, you touch upon flying, for example, but it's about helping people as well in the sense that, I'm not saying this is effective, but it probably is. But if you're a victim of certain things in your life that has happened to you, if you feel like something's bad's going to happen, you're going to always think it. So you got to think the alternative.
yeah,
Now, example being, you know someone, for example, been in a narcissistic abuse relationship, your mind always will think every person's going to be that same way.
exactly. Exactly. And I mean, and it's not true, but it sure feels that way. I was talking to a client last week and she was in a very abusive relationship and her boyfriend had blonde curly hair. And every time she sees a man out in public with blonde curly hair, short, tall, doesn't matter. It's the blonde curly hair. She has this overwhelming feeling of anxiety. And it's just hair. It's not, it's, I mean, the guy is gone.
Mm,
She's out of the relationship. She's living in a different city now. That guy is gone, but the mere, sight of blonde curly hair triggers her. So, um, that's why, you know, typically clinical therapy doesn't work. If you keep talking about, in all kinds of aspects of the past trauma, it's never going to go away. Even if you're dealing with coping mechanisms. If I said to you right now, I've been broke my entire life, but I've made the decision, no more. I'm getting out of debt. Guess what? All my brain hears is debt, right? And it continuously focuses on debt. So what needs to happen is to be able to say, I am absolutely surrounded every day by success and prosperity. I attract wealth and prosperity to myself every day.
yeah,
Now it's telling the subconscious mind different, right? And then when this information has been put into the file often enough, long enough, and that becomes the dominant file, then we're not aware that we're doing it. But we start to invest in activities that make that statement true, right? So the person who was broke and in debt their whole life, now on a subconscious level, they start investing in activities. They start looking for opportunities. They're not even aware that they're doing it. But now, because that message has become so strong, that then becomes the driving force.
yeah, and it's about retraining the thought process because, like I said, and I often use narcissistic abuse as a example when it is a talk like this because it is a prominent one.
Yeah.
If you mind always thinks it, you will always think it. But at the same time, if you think the opposite of saying, I'm not in it now, I'm in a better place, you will get better. Yes, you do relate to it still in certain topics if you're talking about it with someone.
It's
But
interesting. There was a line in the movie A Beautiful Mind with Russell Crowe. And in the movie, he was a schizophrenic and he worked with this doctor and got better. And at the end of the movie, they were walking down the stairs of the building and they stopped and the doctor turned to him and he said, "Do you still hear the voices, John?" And he said, "Yes, but I've made peace with them." And that's, you know,
that is
that's
that
that's the
deep into
goal.
me. So it's just, about how you address it. The learning is still, you get through it every day and it takes time. That's the thing as well. People think it's going to be a quick fix, but it's not a quick fix when you're trying to heal because it takes time. But as, like you said, that's where you're rebuilding the new file because that's the rebuilding.
Yeah. But you know what? What's interesting, David, though, is it doesn't take that long. I mean, because this is a new approach to clinical therapy, and majority of people who have been in therapy are many, many months to years, sometimes to decades. I have one client who suffered from PTSD for 20 years. He was in therapy for 20 years, and him and I worked together for 5 months. We're done. He's past it. He just moved to Panama, sent me a video of his new apartment in Panama, looking out over the beach, and he was like he couldn't get off his couch when we met. He wasn't brushing his teeth. It was just like, right? So results in this are much, much faster. Usually, kind of in the 2 to 3 to 4 months range to completely be reprogrammed. And listen, my ultimate goal in this is to get people to get back to being themselves.
Mm.
That's it, right? So part of the extension process at the end of the counseling is really beginning to rewire and reset new goals and objectives, because lots of times when people are struggling for a long time, they let go of all the things that matter to them. But now when they start to have confidence and they're opened up again, it's like, well, what kind of health goals do you have, and relationship goals and career goals and financial goals and philanthropy goals, and right? So it opens those doors, and then by then continuing to engage in that, you help the person move further and further and further and further away from where they were that was causing the problems.
Yeah, and the example that I always learned when I was talking about things, and it's a thing I use in certain circumstances nowadays, is I was always told, where do you see yourself in a year's time? Where do you see yourself in 5 years' time? Where do you
Yeah.
see yourself in 10 years' time? That is the example that is actually good because it gives you those clear, definitive goals to aim for. Because if you go, what you're gonna, what you're gonna do tomorrow, I don't know.
And
If you set a target, at least you set a target and you can aim towards it. Because if you, some people live by day, you know that,
yeah,
and that's a good way.
yeah, though, David, I mean, one of the great challenges that I have come to learn in this field is that you and I are talking about this logically, but to the person who is mired in crushing anxiety and stress and low
Mm,
confidence, they don't have the ability
no,
to have a goal. They don't think, leaving their apartment is possible.
no.
So,
And it's the difficulty of getting, understanding that because not everyone does understand that, not easily. And you
but
touch,
once they do, it's just, I mean, we do better when we know better, right?
mm,
So, one of the first stages in working with people is to educate them on, so how's this work, right? Not one person in the history of the world was ever born with a doubt?
mm,
No one. So that's a creation through the experiences of life that
it
end up
is.
building those files in the subconscious mind that create the doubts and the barriers. And, we're born and we lay on our back and we look up and see the universe and everything is there, right? And then as we go through life, more and more and more of those experiences start to build the walls around us
Yeah.
and hem us in, right? So, but through, scientific process of neuroplasticity, the brain is malleable, and all of that information can be reprogrammed and changed.
Yeah, so obviously people be wanting to know how you work more, or is there any, so this is a good example. Is there any way that they can know about you more, as in reading a book, or is there a website they can go to?
Yeah, absolutely. So for people who want to learn more and want to explore this, it's one session at a time. So it's up to people. The first session is absolutely free, because I want us to have a chance to get to know each other, be able to explain, much of what we've been talking about on your show here today, of what the process is of this new approach called therapy. Do they believe it? Do they see a path forward? Right? Talk about their own, personal situation and what's going on with them, and then map out a plan of how this works, and then that's up to them. So if anyone wanted to book a free session, or to go and learn more information, lots of information is on the website and testimonials and the rest of it. The website is called freefromtherapy.com.
And I'll make sure that's in the description when I post edit this, but freefromtherapy.com.
Yeah. And it's, you know what, to so many times, the one guy who suffered from PTSD for 20 years. He saw something I put online. He watched it a couple of times. Then he called me, didn't really believe in anything. Then he booked a session and then he canceled it. And he canceled it two more times. And then we finally booked and we started working together and now he's in Panama. So I guess the one, message to everyone is don't be afraid of finding out, right? The session doesn't cost you anything and you don't have to stay stuck. If we meet and you don't find it's a fit for you, amazing, nothing changed, right? But not finding out and staying stuck. Maybe whoever is listening to the show right now, maybe it's the first time they've heard of, a conversation talking about things they're dealing with. And if they let go of that one opportunity to maybe see if they can get past this, I don't know, when does the next opportunity come along?
It
When
does.
the book talks about, you know what I mean? And it's
Yeah.
sliding doors. I mean, opportunity knocks and just finding out doesn't change anything, but it's important to do. So
And it takes one little grain of inspiration to start your growth in loads
yeah,
of ways.
yeah, it absolutely does. This
And
show, that background, your microphone, me on here, it all started with a thought. Thoughts are incredible things that can change everything.
indeed. And on that, I'd like to say, Randy, thank you for sharing your journey with us today.
Thank you, David. It's been a pleasure to be here.
Hi, my name is Amy Harrison. I just published another book, and this is the first hard copy I've released. Let's claw right into a sneak peek. Hi, I'm my Galaxy Brat. Error. It is becoming clearer. Y'all probably think I'm annoying. Turns out they all just plain boring. I'm just being me, the realest version. Sweet on the inside, tell like it is on the outside. Yes, I embrace love, never hate. But honesty flies in my mouth like a dove. Be careful before it's too late. If you want to read more, visit the link in the description. Meow at you later.
Parsons. The narrator is Kate Barton. Director and producer, Darren Street. Tim Parsons would like to thank family and friends for their support with the paramedic Chris venture. The series is dedicated to the memory of his father, Reverend David Parsons. Copyright Tim Parsons 2020, all rights reserved. Unauthorized use, copying or sharing of this audiobook is strictly prohibited. This has been a Voice Reel studio production for Tim Parsons.
Oh, good afternoon, everyone. I've just been listening to the Paramedic Chris children's books on audio again, and I just love it because they've given a tribute in one of them to my dad as well, who passed away a few years ago. I love audio books, and it's great to walk around, and it's great to sit at the computer, if you're out jogging or wherever, to listen to them as well. All four of the Paramedic Chris children's books are available on audio book from Amazon. Go and take a listen to them. You won't be disappointed. You'll hear what happens when a community pulls together and supports one another. The best thing is to pop over to my website, paramedicchriskidsbooks.org, and you'll see the links on the shop page. Keep safe, everyone, and thank you for being you.
The Journey podcast explores stories of personal growth, challenges, and life-changing moments. Each episode dives into unique experiences, offering insights and inspiration for listeners navigating their own paths. I believe everyone has a story worth sharing. If you'd like to share your journey with David and others, email your story to wisewords1983@reborn.com, and it may be featured in a future episode.